So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this call. It's going to be 45 minutes, and I think that's nowhere near going to be enough, in all honesty, to get through the content that we want to do. Because when we talk about corporate venturing, when we talk about ramping, on-ramping smaller companies, getting the distribution from the larger ones, there's just so much that's going on in there globally, so little perhaps that's going on there in South Africa and across Africa. So as we go through this, we want to actually get into the real detail. What is happening, what's working, what's not working, is there hope? What sort of policy changes can we make, and what's actually Aspen doing in this particular space? And then a very clear example that we want to run through, a piece of work that they've just recently done with Gibbs and the Raizcorp Group. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. I will introduce Stavros just in a minute. If you've not joined the calls, firstly though, please do ask your questions in the comments or in the Q&A. We want this to be interactive, so if you've got these burning questions, just get them out there and I'll do my best to make sure that they all get answered. And I don't want to put Stavros on the spot, but if we miss any of them, we'll try to get them answered after the call as well. Isn't that right, Stavros?
Yep, quite right.
Okay, good. So, having said I'm not putting you on the spot, I just did. Stavros, welcome. Where are you calling in from?
So firstly, let me greet all the participants. It's a great pleasure to be on this call with you. And I'm firmly grounded in Johannesburg today.
Lovely. Now, a very short intro for people that don't know you, which I can't imagine there's anyone on the call that doesn't, because you're one of the most connected people that I've ever come across. Your day role as a senior executive at Aspen, in charge of the strategic trade aspects of the business, we'll talk about in a minute. But I think it's actually more interesting the many other services that you're providing outside of the group, working with the World Economic Forum, working in different committees, the merit orders for the government here in South Africa, with Business Unity and so many others that are out there. So what is actually a strategic trade role at Aspen, just to give us some context?
Well, firstly, let me say Aspen is a bit of an unorthodox company. We're highly entrepreneurial. I think we've done particularly well in merging a corporate discipline, sort of a corporate governance discipline with entrepreneurship. I think we've done that particularly well. And that is probably why you won't find a title elsewhere of a Group Senior Executive Strategic Trade. So it is unorthodox, and I think it speaks to, again, that entrepreneurial flair that we've got within the group. So ordinarily, this would cover strategy, it would cover communications, stakeholder management and relations. But all of those disciplines can be rather mundane, if I may be bold enough to say that. So I think everything that we do, even if you're doing public affairs in the organization, and not denigrating any public affair colleagues on the call or outside of this call, because they perform a very important role. But I think we underpin all of these roles by saying that there has to always be a commercial and or a trade thread to all of these things. So if you're going in and having a discussion on shaping policy, for example, you should be able to speak to the commercial operations within the group equally well and with the same level of fluency and comfort.
Just tell us a little bit about Aspen quickly, just in case there's anyone on the call maybe dialing in from overseas that hasn't heard of the group.
I would need the remaining 42 minutes we've got left, but I'm gonna cut it down to 2 minutes, if I may, because it is a rather interesting story, and it's been an incredible journey. The company is 25 years old. It started off in a 2-bedroom house on the Berea in Durban 25 years ago, as I said, and the main bedroom was the finance and admin department. The second bedroom was marketing and sales. And then, of course, the lounge and dining room doubled up as meeting rooms for reps and conferences. Initially, no thought process of selling products beyond over-the-counter self-care products like smoking cessation therapies. and also no ambitions at that time of going into manufacturing or developing a global footprint. But I'm very pleased to say 25 years later, through a very exciting journey, we are today South Africa's most globalized company. We have operations, and what I mean by operations is active marketing and sales platforms with or without factories. So we have operations in 60 countries globally, and we have 23 manufacturing sites around the world, including manufacturing in Brazil, Mexico, Germany, Netherlands, France, Ghana, Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, where we've got 3 sites, India, and Australia. So we've developed a significant global footprint. We're also leaders in some very important therapeutic segments. So we are the largest in the world now outside of the United States in general anesthesia and muscle blockers. These are complex products to manufacture, and particularly proud of our ability to occupy a leadership position there. We are ranked number 2 in the world in injectable thrombosis, and we also manufacture, market, and distribute a number of other complex products, including some oncology products that are very important for patients. So all in all, that 25-year journey.
Yeah. So you almost kept it into the 2 minutes, but I
was going to round off there. I was just going to round it. Yeah. I was just going to say that the thing that we're most proud of what we've achieved in the 25 years, is how we've been able to pull our people that have been with us from inception, people that started off as rookies from New Brighton Township in Port Elizabeth. And those are the same people we send today to Germany and Netherlands to fix our operations there. So that's probably the most heartwarming experience of all, is how these people have grown and developed with us, and today are leaders in their particular discipline.
So I think it's a good segue, that, because 25 years ago it starts in a couple of bedrooms, and it's now a global success, and very similar to the typical Silicon Valley success story that we read about, from Microsoft to Twitter to whatever it is that you're interested in. That doesn't seem to be so feasible anymore, certainly in South Africa. It certainly seems harder nowadays for the startup and the small medium enterprises to get growth. They seem to be really being left behind and lost with very limited amounts of support. Is this opinion that I have incorrect, and what's your view in terms of where we've got to, if it's not?
Well, I would largely share your view. And I say so evidentially, because if you go back to, and Aspen is very much a product of the post-democratic South African era. So we're sort of one of the Mandela babies, if you want to call it that, because we were founded in 1997, 98. And I think post-democracy, that period of 94 to the early 2000s, I think we saw a number of entrepreneurs, industrialists coming to the fore. The market started opening up globally. South Africa was transforming, and I think there was a general good buzz about South Africa, and we saw fantastic entrepreneurs coming through. I'm not seeing that same rate of entrepreneurs today. Certainly, we keep speaking as a country of the need to industrialize our economy, and we got to back manufacturing. And I think a rather sad statistic is that over the last 22 years, manufacturing as a contribution to GDP in our country has declined by 50%. So we once contributed 22% as a manufacturing sector to GDP. It's now declined to about 10 to 11%. So that's a sharp drop. And of course, when you deindustrialize to that extent, you're also going to start losing entrepreneurs. And there's no better sector, I believe, to grow an economy than the manufacturing sector, because you get both up and downstream activities. And it's a telling statistic, I'm afraid. So we're not getting the same level of entrepreneurs, of industrialists coming through. And there's a whole host of reasons, I believe, for that, which I'm very happy to start unpacking on this call. Not all of them, of course, so we'll need the remainder of the time. But should I just highlight one that I think is particularly important? Is I think as a country, we're stifling entrepreneurship. If I just have a look alone at the number of social grants that we pay to, we pay out, there's 18 to 19 million South Africans that are dependent on social grants. Now, those are very important contributions to people that have very few, if any, means. However, are we at the same time stifling entrepreneurship in the process of these social support? So I'm not saying we shouldn't have social support programs, but we need to balance that out within, infusing a spirit and a philosophy of entrepreneurs, and that entrepreneurs will be given opportunities in the economy. And we need to inspire these entrepreneurs and take them to greater heights. So that's just one of the areas I think that we ought to be addressing as a country.
What else is blocking this? I mean, but if we just go back a stage, I've read and people have talked to me who are in the know here that when we go and look at growth in economies, it's usually coming from small and medium enterprise. A lot of people might think it comes from large listed corporates, but actually they're kind of like revolving doors. I mean, they sit there, there's a plateau, we hire, people retire, more people are hired. It's not actually as job creative and GDP growth creative as we might hope. The real power for most countries is coming from small, medium enterprises, and manufacturing is obviously a big part of it. And then in theory, we should be seeing businesses and governments putting a lot of effort to enabling the growth in these sectors. And it feels like we're missing out on some real initiatives in that particular space to drive. Where else is it going wrong, I suppose, is where I'm trying to ask here, Stavros.
Colin, a very complex question with a multitude of responses. So let me keep the responses focused on three areas. The first is we've got to acknowledge the state of our economy right now. Where does our economy sit? And there's certainly no excitement when you get a revision of our growth forecast from 0.1 to 0.3%. So it looks like we're kind of almost rewarding a 0.3% growth for the remaining part of the year. I mean, that's not going to excite anyone. So we've got to acknowledge the state of the economy at present, and what do we do to fix the economy amongst the many, many headwinds that we're experiencing. And it's not just the energy crisis or the safety and security concerns, the mafia cartels. I mean, there are many, many areas that we can go into: infrastructure, logistics, supply chain. There are many, many headwinds that we face. And I'd like to come back and revisit some of those in terms of what can we do as a country to fix some of those areas, because those are the key enablers to driving any economy. And, if you're disenabling, you're not going to get the type of economic growth. And entrepreneurs can only flourish when there is economic growth and opportunities. So that's number one, we've got to acknowledge. Number two, we need to look at some of our policy choices, coherence of policy, and implementation in particular. Now, in many respects, we've got some really good policies, but we fail dismally when it comes to executing or discharging on those. And it could be something as concerning as not having the capacity to deliver on these things, or something as simple as a lack of coherence across a number of departments and or ministries that are preventing implementation and or execution. And in fact, this morning I was at a SADC pharmaceutical session, and if I have a look at how we kind of bumble along in implementing pharmaceutical localization in our country, but then I look at a country like Rwanda, where I'm not suggesting that we become this draconian and start decreeing things either, but Rwanda right now have got a pharmaceutical plan, and they're implementing it. They say, come hell or high water, we are buying locally. End of the story. In our country, you'll get different departments becoming involved, and at the end of the day, you'll end up importing all the products. So these are the type of policy choices that we need to fix up. And in particular, we need a capable state that is able to cohere in the first place and then to implement. So let me give you a further example, and I'll go into my third point now. I don't believe that we are making full use of the different business and or industrial levers and instruments that we have at our disposal as a country. So let me focus on just two of those. The first is that the state, so our government purchases goods and services in excess of R1 trillion.
Wow.
So we should be analyzing this and saying, look, there's R1 trillion that has been procured. Okay. How much of that are we actually procuring from existing or future entrepreneurs and or industrialists? And I keep talking about industrialists because of the multiplier effect, as I keep saying, that manufacturing has back into our economy. And you will find that there is very little focus or effort placed into that. Now, a big complaint of entrepreneurs and people that are wanting to go into business for the first time and are desperate to make some type of a breakthrough, amongst their complaints would be, firstly, that they cannot access capital.
Yeah.
And you ask, well, why can you not access capital? Well, the answer is pretty obvious. They either don't have the collateral to put up, or alternatively, the banks are going to ask for offtake. So they'll say, Colin, very happy to borrow money to you. Okay, you need 5 million rand or R1 million or whatever it is. However, show me, Colin, your offtakes. Okay, and then you're going to shrug your shoulders and say, well, I don't have an offtake because I can't get that breakthrough. And I can't get that breakthrough unless I access capital. So it becomes a virtuous cycle and a race down to the bottom, unfortunately. What we should be doing is leveraging public procurement policy to give these entrepreneurs, either existing or first-time entrepreneurs, offtakes. And these should be sustainable offtakes over a period of time so that they can go and access capital, and also that they develop sustainable businesses. Because also know you're saying, sorry,
just define off.
Sorry, just say that again, Colin.
Offtakes. Can you just define what that is, what it means?
Sure. So let me default to a pharmaceutical example because that's what I know best. Okay. Our country at present, I'm not telling you anything all 44 participants on this call don't already know, but South Africa has the highest HIV infection rate of any country in the world. So we've got the unenviable dishonor, if I can call it that, of having 18% of the world's infected population in a single country, and we only represent about 0.5% of the world population. The sad thing is that we are importing most of our antiretrovirals. The positive way of looking at this is to say, well, every month, 5.5 to 6 million South Africans are consuming a monthly course of antiretrovirals. So this is a pill they swallow every day for 30 days of that month, and then they go on to the next month. Okay. Now, those are big volumes. What we should be saying is, how much capacity do we have as a country? So if we need 6 million and we've only got a capacity of 3 million, okay, then let's ensure that we keep the 3 million capacity, but we also open up the opportunity for would-be entrepreneurs and or industrialists to come into the space by saying, look, through a process, we've identified you, there's been an ERR, you are an operator, you've got the expertise, the competence, you're a pharmaceutical person, not a fly-by-night. Okay, we are going to get into an arrangement with you that for the next 5 years, we will give you an offtake, provided an offtake as the state, provided that you meet certain conditions. And those conditions should be not based on nepotism or, we like, or this person's politically connected or whatever it might be. It must be based on their expertise and their competence. And if you could, in that way, leverage a further 2 million packs, okay, and you get 3 or 4 startups coming in, that's fantastic for the country, because not only are you reducing the trade deficit, which is gaping, I might add, in the pharmaceutical sector right now, but you are also giving access to offtakes over a sustained period of time. And then, Colin, you can go to the bank and say, well, look, provided I meet the following conditions, I can get to produce 200,000 packs of ARVs every month for the next 5 years. I've got to meet certain price commitments, etc., certain quality standards, but at least I can give you, the banker, an inkling of an offtake. And my offtake is going to be 200,000 packs over 60 months, and you can work out the numbers, and suddenly the bank will have a completely different view. The other thing this does, of course, is it means that you can start spawning other smaller industries. Because now all of a sudden, if you're making this product, I don't know, in Durban or wherever it might be, there's someone that does packaging and labeling that can open up down the road. You can do more testing of these drugs. You can start producing the securitainers. You can start producing the capsules locally. So all of these things create that multiplier effect back into the economy. So in summary, what is the benefit here of leveraging public procurement more favorably? What do you achieve? Firstly, you can put a whole lot of entrepreneurs into business who are currently denied access to the markets. Secondly, you can get better security of supply for the country. And thirdly, the economic numbers will work for the country, because we're presently financing in hard currency all these trade deficits, which is inexcusable if you've got so much of the requirement in our country. So these are the type of things, Colin, I think we've got to look at. Let's infuse a spirit, a philosophy of entrepreneurship. Let's support our entrepreneurs with all the headwinds. Let's optimize the instruments that we've got in government. We don't have a lot of instruments because fiscally we're not in a great space as a country. But something as basic as better leveraging procurement spend and public procurement policy, which, by the way, doesn't exist because it's taken to the courts and has been suspended. For me, those are inexcusable things. We should be able to get those things right, quite frankly.
Well, that's all very much dependent on governments, and I think if we've learned anything over the last 10, 15, 20 years, that waiting for something from government is a precarious place to be. What can businesses do, either individually or collectively, to actually stimulate markets and try to go and support the SME sector?
Well, then the first thing we need to do is we need to fix the economy. And we know that the capacity of government, when we talk about a capable state, we know that the capacity has been hollowed out largely over the last 15 years. So if you're in that position where you have limited capacity, the private sector has to step in and support, aid, and abet with that capacity deficiency. And this is what we are trying to do as corporate South Africa's organized business. I'm going to just momentarily slip on my Business Unity South Africa hat and my Business for South Africa hat. We've realized this, and we've got many detractors in our own segment. Corporate South Africa is full of doomsayers, okay, but there's also a realization that this is the government we've got. We've got to work with the government, right? Now, we cannot usurp the role of government. I need to be very clear on this. Government has to lead all of these programs because government is, or are the people that are elected to govern the country. But can we start forging partnerships where we start making private sector capacity, expertise, resource, human capital. We start making this available largely on a pro bono basis. I think that is a very important type of partnership to be establishing. And I'm very pleased to say that during COVID, by way of a good precedent that worked, the private and public sector got together. We got together under the banner of Business for South Africa, which is an execution arm of BUSA. And we rolled out and administered the vaccine to almost 40 million vaccines were administered. I think were it not for the anti-vax movement, I think we would have achieved a much higher quantum than that. But what I can tell you, working together and alongside each other, the private and the public sector. So we established a principle where private sector patients could go to a public facility and get vaccinated, and vice versa. A public patient could come to a private facility. And it worked particularly well because at the peak of the rollout, South Africa was amongst the fastest countries to administer the vaccine rollout. And that just demonstrated to me that when we put our heads together and the private and public sector work together, then I think you are going to get results. And I think it does inspire a lot of confidence and hope. Now, more recently, what we've done is, this is about 6 weeks ago, we've set up a formalized process with the president and cabinet. It was off the basis of a very similar type of philosophy I've just explained to you on the vaccine rollout. We went to government and said, look, there are 3 significant disenablers in getting us to the economic growth that we need. They're not the only 3, but let's focus on the following 3: energy, infrastructure, logistics, crime, safety, security, and corruption, those 3. We went with a proposal, pleased to tell you that government accepted the proposal. And what we are doing now is we've made private sector capacity headed up in each instance by CEOs. So if I look at the crime, safety, security, and corruption stream, that is on our side, in the private sector side, is headed up by Yanni Durant of Remgro, Neil Froneman of Sibanya Stillwater. So these are very successful CEOs who have stepped in, are making their expertise available, and will bring along with them capacity. We've set up a PMO office to assist with the coordination, coherence, and pulling together the resources. And I could say the same thing about James McKay in energy. So he stepped up. He's chairing that particular working stream. We've got an agreement that we would meet with the president 6 weekly to report back on progress, where there might be bottlenecks, etc. So this is a government still leading, because I was very clear earlier, we don't want to usurp, and neither should we, the role of government. This is a partnership where we make private sector capacity available at a very difficult time in the country to try and stimulate that economic growth that we are not only deserving of, but urgently required of, or require, I should say. So that gives me a lot of hope. And people say, what hope have you got? We're facing an election in about 10 months' time, or 9 to 10 months' time, and it's going to be much of the same and all the rest of it. So I think what gives me hope is that we've got a very strong, robust, and buoyant private sector in our country. And I think private and public sector working alongside under the right governance structures led by government gives me more than a glimmer of hope for the future.
One of the roles that businesses can play and have a really significant impact is in this space of corporate venturing. And I suppose corporate venturing, if you wanted to define it, is essentially just helping startups one way or another, but doing it for the benefit in the longer term for profit for the large organization as well. And there's so many different types of corporate venturing, aren't there? I mean, you've got everything from what people will typically associate with it, M&A and acquiring other smaller organizations. But you've also got lots of other ways to go and support startups. So acqui-hiring, hiring them in so that you're getting access to certain skill sets, or providing them with on-ramps, doing JVs, running hackathons, doing incubator work, financing them. There's so many different ways. And yet in South Africa, my sense is that we don't do much of that, because when you look overseas, virtually every single Fortune 500 company is doing quite a substantial amount of corporate venturing across all these different perspectives that I've mentioned. Just think about Google or Microsoft with OpenAI more recently, and the list is kind of endless. Salesforce is another very active participant in this space. Mars do a lot of this type of stuff. Do you have a view about why this isn't so popular and focused on in SA?
Colin, I think this requires a particular mindset country. Now, I think that we, corporate venturing in a different language could be enterprise and supplier development, and or mentorship, and or how do you assist with access to financing, for example. So I think it means all of the above and more. So let me just try and unpack a couple of those aspects. So the first thing is, I think we've got to analyze, has a triple BE scorecard been a successful way of transforming the economy and more broadly society? And I think the answer to that is pretty obvious. And I think what I do like about the scorecard is, for me, the most important of the elements, and you might remember the original scorecard had 7 elements. It's now been reduced to 5. The most important 2 for me are enterprise and supply development. I think that's the first one. And the second one is SED, socioeconomic development. Now, why do I say that? I say that firstly because you can do lots of deals at an ownership level, but are you really transforming the economy on the ground? Okay, and I don't think you are. But if you are tangibly moving to give entrepreneurs on the ground, as I've been saying all along for the last 30 minutes or so, if you provide them the opportunity to access a market, and you contributing towards shaping the market or giving access to the market, that is far more impactful and effective than an ownership type of deal, in my opinion. And I say that furthermore because you can effect an ownership change, but it doesn't mean that operationally things have necessarily changed. Have you created 300,000 new entrepreneurs? Now, if you create 300,000 new entrepreneurs and they each employ 20 people, that's like 6 million people, right? So that changes the world for you. So we need to better leverage our enterprise and supplier development programs. They shouldn't be a tick box exercise. What does that actually mean in practical terms?
I think most companies do it for a tick box exercise, Stavros.
Now, look, I think this varies from company to company, and I'm not going to cast any sort of any views on any one or more. I'm just talking more broadly as a corporate sector in our country. I think we could be doing more. I say we could be doing more because we need a more formalized way of pairing and partnering. We get at Aspen requests from, by way of example, a company that wants to produce textbooks and pens for schools, right? Now, that's clearly not where we are focused. They would be better off partnering with Waltons or someone like that, right? So I think this pairing and matching is very important, because we wouldn't mind as Aspen, as an organization, if eventually, provided companies meet the quality standards and are cost effective and all the rest of it, we would love to have a situation where we're buying 100% of our requirements from South African companies, and more so if it's from small, medium businesses. So the type of products that we're procuring are packaging material, labeling, package inserts, the shells of capsules, vials, ampules. These are all glass vials and glass ampules, rubber stoppers, securitainers, which I mentioned earlier, glass bottles. I can go on and on. The list is endless. Now, nothing would give us more satisfaction than if we had local companies with offtakes that are able to compete. Of course, they got to be competitive and meet the appropriate standards, quality standards. We would love to have 100%, if we could get there, of our procurement happening here in South Africa. But it does require a different type of thought process, partnership model. Okay, now I mentioned socio-economic development earlier as well. Now that's always the last and the soft element in the scorecard. For me, it's a very important element, because alongside giving access to capital and offtakes, if you don't have the right skills and the right competencies, you're not going to succeed either. Okay. And one of the biggest failings, I believe, in our country is that our school leavers, when they leave school, or even those that get undergrad bachelor's degrees or go to technicons, etc., are they ready to hit the road running immediately when they enter the workplace? For those that are fortunate enough to enter the workplace, the answer is no. So this thing of integrating a formal education with the requirements of the marketplace is not an area that we've addressed in our country, regrettably. And it shows in our global competitiveness. It also shows on, if I just take what we do at Aspen, we get graduates very often coming out, and they're fantastic graduates. Some are even cum laude. But can they operate a production machine in our Stavros facility? And the answer is no. You've almost got to retrain them. Now, retraining means a loss of competitiveness. So we've got to get a better and a more pragmatic alignment of the type of graduates that enter the workplace and what is actually required for the South African and more broadly for global markets. And let me just add lastly, I think...
Can I interrupt just quickly, because we've only got 6 or 7 minutes left, right, unfortunately. I hope I'm not interrupting what is the most important point of the call, but I just wanted to go back, because you mentioned partnership models, and in your top left corner there, we've got the Gordon Institute of Business Science as the sign, and I did mention Raizcorp at the start. So I'm happy to realize, I suppose, that where you said that you'd love to go and help to provide on-ramps to startups, you've actually gone beyond that, haven't you, and put your money where your mouth is, put resource and commitments into doing something in that space through Gibbs and with Raizcorp. Can you just talk through exactly what that was?
Yeah, so Colin, we could have, and this is the point I was trying to make earlier. You could just mechanistically say, look, we're going to allocate 3 million rand to bursaries and or scholarships, right? Or you could say, look, we're still going to do that, but we're going to do something different, and that is help inspire a next wave or generation of entrepreneurs. So the partnership with Gibbs and with Raizcorp is a very simple one. Said, look, what we will do is we will dedicate time and resource to, in a partnership with Raizcorp and Gibbs, put together a competition, and that competition would call on would-be entrepreneurs from the medical and or healthcare industry, or both, to present a business case. The business case would be focused on a business model, a concept, a new invention, a new innovation, for example, And that would then get presented to a consortium from Gibbs, Raizcorp, and Aspen. What is the benefit of doing that? I think firstly it gets people that are either in undergrad or postgrad programs to start thinking about what are those practical elements that are going to land. And the winners of the competition don't get a trip to Greece, okay, because that's what people normally get, okay. The winners get the following. First of all, they would have had the opportunity to present in a board setting. So very different when you write these things up at university, under or postgrad. You write it up in a lecture remarks at whatever. This is a experiential, practical opportunity for a group of participants to present in a board setting and to learn from that experience. So I think that's the biggest takeout, is that it's a learning experience, and it allows you to get more focused around, if you go and pitch an ESD concept or a plan or a model to someone, how do you actually do that in the real world? And I think that's the most important thing of what's being achieved here. The second thing is that we've committed as Aspen that we would make available as a connection or as a contact, an entry to our procurement teams. This doesn't mean we will end up procuring necessarily from this entity, but at least it allows them access to a big corporate's procurement team, and maybe their product that they're producing does land with us, and we can start procuring their product, whatever it might be. But what it does do is it allows them to have that interaction and interfacing, and in so doing, it allows them to sharpen up their business proposal, their business concept, whatever it might be. And then lastly, we've also committed, of course, there is a prize related to this, but we have committed to paying for the administrative fees administration fees of a startup, meaning that if you've got to go and get a company incorporated, etc., we will cover that cost. But the most important thing for me here is that these students get to sit in front of a board setting and experience in real time, real life situations, and then get mentoring feedback thereafter. So in our last round, one of the groups had a fantastic product, a product for asthma, but couldn't get access to market. And I've undertaken to put them in touch with some of the biggest procurers of these inhaler devices in the world. Okay. Now, whether they landing an order or not, I can't say, but at very least, it's going to give them access to those sort of people. So that's the importance, the relevance of it. But the most important thing is that we start infusing a spirit, a culture of entrepreneurship in the country. No better way to do that than you have these type of boardroom settings, and people compete against each other, and they sharpen up their business proposal and they present it to you.
So last question, we've got 2 minutes left. I think it will be the last question. Let's see. Stavros says, I understand the benefit that the startups get. It's amazing what you've offered for those that entered the competition. I understand the benefit that Gibbs will get out of it in terms of supporting these initiatives as one of Africa's foremost business schools. I understand why Raizcorp does it. I mean, they are perhaps the preeminent group who are incubating startups. So that makes sense. I don't understand the benefit that large corp get from this, and I was hoping that you can share what you think the benefit is. There's clearly a CSI aspect, and we should be doing good. Do you actually get an economic benefit in the long term, which other corporates should look to implement too, based on your experiences?
Colin, there's not going to be, probably in my assessment, an immediate direct benefit to Aspen, but that's inconsequential. I think what matters to Aspen is that if we build an economy that is growing and is sound, it improves the business prospects of everyone. We can't have a situation where we're a corporate, we're a contributor to the tax base of the country, but we have an unstable country. So you can't live on an island and say, well, I'm fine in my little space and it doesn't really matter if everything else around you is collapsing. You've got to contribute to fixing what is going wrong around you. So as a philosophy in CSI SED, we look to establish and contribute towards sustainable communities in those parts of the country that we operate, whether it's Quebec, Port Elizabeth, West London, or anywhere else in the country. So that's a basic business philosophy. I think other corporates have done this. We've seen the establishment of the SME fund a couple of years ago, and entrepreneurs have been beneficiaries of that. So I don't think you can sit here as corporate South Africa and live in an island on your own and say, well, my business is doing fine. Who the hell cares what's going on around me? Because eventually your own business will collapse as well, unless you try and contribute to fixing what is around you.
Fantastic. Stavros, thank you very much for joining us. For everyone that dialed in, thank you very much for doing so.
Thanks very much, Colin.
I'm sorry we didn't get... That's no worries. I'm sorry we didn't get through to all the questions that were being asked out there, any of them. Actually, I was very selfish today, but we had a limited amount of time, so I do apologize on that. And of course, if anyone's interested in looking at doing something similar, running competitions to incentivize startups, then give me a shout and we'll put you in contact with the guys at Gibbs and Raizcorp. So to everyone, stay safe and we'll see you all soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Great. Thanks very much.